Hello and welcome to the C++ series. In this video, we are going to write our very first C++ program called Hello World. All it has to do is to show or output a message to the screen saying hello to the world. So essentially, this program has to print the message on the screen when it runs. And it turns out showing a message is not really that complicated. We can just write cout hello world and that's all. But, well, there are some cryptic symbols in this line of code that do need some explanation. We use these two angle brackets to represent the flow of data. In this program, we are sending the message hello world to the output, so the arrow points to the word cout. Also, the message is wrapped between two double quotations to tell the computer that we don't want it to process this message, but rather keep it as is and unchanged to later print it on the screen using cout. At this point, we have implemented all the logic this program needs, as it just has to print this message. But there are a couple of issues that we need to solve in order to get this program to run. The first one is that the C++ language requires programmers to end each expression, or simply put, command or line of code, with a semicolon. So we add one at the end of this line. The next thing is that, as we said before, we wanted this message to be printed on the screen when the program runs. In order to tell the computer to run this line of code when our program runs, we have to put it inside the main function. We're going to discuss functions later in this series, but for now, let's just call it the main section, which is where our program starts. The next issue is that the cout command that we're using is not exactly a part of the C++ language itself, but a part of its standard library. A library is simply a piece of code that another programmer has written so you don't have to, simplifying the process of creating applications. And the standard library is the one that is shipped with the C++ language. Not that it's a part of it, but it's shipped with it. So we don't have to install it separately, but we're going to have to make it clear that we want to use this library. In order to do so, we must add a line of code on top of our file, including the IO stream or input-output stream library, which helps us to either print messages on the screen or ask the user for input. And one last thing is that everything in the standard library, including cout, is defined inside the std or standard namespace. More on what namespaces are later, but just know that we have to either tell the compiler explicitly to go and find the cout command inside this std namespace, which means that if we had multiple cout commands, we would have to write the std double colon every time. Or we can ask the compiler to always include that namespace when it's looking for a name, which can be done by adding the using namespace std statement to the code. The second method is going to be our go-to for now, as it removes the need to write std double colon every time. Now if we run this code, we get this result. Well, wait, what is that thing that is showing up after our message? Well, this one requires a bit of a backstory. Contrary to the graphical and visual interface we're used to nowadays, back in the day, computers didn't have the power to produce graphics that our computers do now. So users had to interact with their computers using commands via a command line interface. You had to write some commands, hit enter, get the result of them, and wait for the next prompt to be shown. This prompt was the computer's way of indicating that the previous command had finished and you can enter the next one. But it's the command responsibility to move this prompt to the next line, essentially printing a new line character at the end of their execution, like when you use the return or enter key on your keyboard. We use backslash followed by a letter to represent special characters, and the symbol picked for the new line character is \n. We can add this \n at the end of our message to move the cursor to the next line before our application quits. This works perfectly, but There is a somewhat more common way of moving the cursor to the next line in the C++ language, and that is using endl, which is short for endline. Endline is also a part of the standard library and can be added to our code like this. Notice how cout is now receiving two things to print. We can continue adding more messages to the same cout statement instead of writing new ones. But we must add an arrow for each of them, like in the example you just saw. With all that said and done, you have officially created your first C++ program. Thank you for watching this video and hope to see you in the next one.